Welcome to Tart Words. I'm your host, Linda Hengerer, and I'm a writer, a reader, and a baker. I talk to writers about their latest book and what inspires them, chat with fellow author Suzanne Fox about what writers can learn from reading their favorite authors, and share fast and easy recipes for anyone looking for a sweet treat. Join me as I share Tart Bites, Tart Thoughts, and Tart Words. Today I'm speaking with Raquel V. Reyes, who writes stories with Latina characters. Her Cuban-American heritage, Miami, and the Caribbean feature prominently in her work. Raquel is a co-chair for Sleuthfest. Her short stories can be found in the Malice Domestic anthology, Murder Most Theatrical, and in the 2021 crime fiction anthology, Midnight Hour. Mango, Mambo, and Murder, the first novel in her Caribbean Kitchen Mystery series, will be released October 2021. Hi, Raquel. I'm looking forward to hearing about your latest book today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
I am too. Tell me about your latest book, or the book that is coming out in October of 2021.
Yes, October 12th, which is honestly almost here. It's called Mango, Mambo, and Murder, a Caribbean Kitchen Mystery. And it is set in Miami. My main character is a Cuban-American. She's a food anthropologist. I'm not a food anthropologist, but I am Cuban-American. And I'm very happy to be introducing culinary cozy fans to a new flavor of cozy. You're going to get so many Caribbean treats in this series. So I'm excited for that.
I am too. My brother-in-law is Cuban, and my sisters learned to make some Cuban dishes. And certainly when we were at family gatherings, when the kids were smaller, we don't live in the same state anymore, so I haven't seen them in a number of years. But certainly when we would get together for the holidays and whatnot, there would be a lot of Cuban foods that we were eating, and I enjoyed many of them.
Well, good. I've got recipes in the back of the book. It won't be just Cuban-American. It's going to be all Caribbean. There's going to be some Puerto Rican and Dominican and Jamaican and Haitian. And hopefully in books to come, there'll be some other, Trinidadian and good flavors, because the Caribbean has some delicious foods that I'm happy to introduce our readers to.
Absolutely. Is this book part of a series?
It is. It's the first in the series. Like I said, it's a Caribbean kitchen mystery. Miriam Quiñones is a food anthropologist. She's just finished up her PhD in New York when her husband says, "Hey, honey, let's move back to Miami. My parents are going to help us get a house. I'll have a better job opportunity. It'll be great for the family." And so she moves back, but she's moved into the tawny enclave of Coral Shores. She actually grew up in Hialeah, which is part of Miami, which is much more Spanish language oriented. Mm-hmm. So she's now moved into her in-laws' neck of the woods, so to speak. And there's a little tension there. Her mother-in-law is, I don't want to say manipulative, but she is
old school.
Maybe she's not happy with the fact that her son married Miriam. We'll say that.
Would she have preferred a more traditional wife for her son?
Oh, she definitely would have preferred Juliet, who's one of the characters in the first story, to have been her daughter-in-law. Yes, there's some tension there for sure.
You cannot have a good story without tension somewhere, and preferably from multiple directions.
Yes.
Where did the idea for your main character come from? You're not a food anthropologist, but Miriam is.
Right. Well, I love documentaries, and I watch a lot of food shows. And you know what Anthony Bourdain does when he had his shows, and he would go visit stuff and he would talk about the food, but he would also talk so much about the culture that it came from. Especially in the Caribbean, there is a shared history, even though you had Spanish colonies and French colonies and British colonies, right? There's a shared history of colonization. There's also a shared history of enslaved Africans coming to the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. And they brought with them a lot of foods from Africa that have become staples in the cuisine, the Caribbean cuisine. And so I really liked that idea of bringing in that history and being able to share that history and being able to talk about food cultures and food ways I also wanted to have a Latina who had a higher degree. She's got a PhD. And so some of it was a combination of all of those things. It was a combination of my interest in the Caribbean culture and all the ties that has. And then also wanting to have representation because we don't have a lot of Latinas in the mystery genre. And I don't really know of that many, even if there is one in the subgenre of cozies.
And I think it's interesting when you're looking at the history because you're looking at island nations. So they were initially limited to the food that could be grown or found on their island. And then with colonization came the influence of the colonizers, whether it be French or English or Dutch. So
Right.
you get the overlay of their cuisine with the local ingredients, and then as trading becomes more prevalent and they can get other ingredients, that expands their food culture too.
Sure. There's a lot of different things. And when you look at the Haitian cuisine, their techniques are all French.
Yes.
And so that plays a lot into it. Yeah. So it's kind of, I don't want to say limitless, but there's a depth there.
Yes.
That is fun to explore.
Is it based on a real story?
Mango, Mambo, and Murder. It is not based on a real story, but there are some little currents in there. Miami is or in South Florida really, has a long history of Ponzi schemes, scams, all of these other things, Medicaid fraud, and so forth. So one of the main characters, or one of the protagonists in the first story, is Dr. Fuentes. He is a Cuban herbalist. We learn he is not a doctor. He claims that he's a medical doctor, an MD. He's actually a dentist. He was a dentist in Cuba, but when he came over to Miami, he couldn't practice as a dentist. He made up all of this herbal business and teas and this, that, and the other. And he's shady. Mm-hmm. Let's just say, there's a part of him that's true, and then there's a part of him that's really shady for a get rich quick scheme.
There's a lot of that in Florida. I think the nature of the state lends itself to those sketchy characters coming down here.
I think that's really where it was based on. I mean, come on, they sold a bunch of Northerners swampland, and so they come down all the way to the end of the state, and they realize that what they bought really isn't what they were told it was.
Not quite. Not quite. And then you get someone like Henry Flagler who put the railroad in and was able to do something with it. But yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of, I've got some prime land available for you. And if you're stuck with the land, I guess you try to make the best of the situation. And I also think that with some people, the idea of coming down so far from home when transportation was difficult, they had an opportunity to reinvent themselves.
Sure. You could be anything down here. I mean, look at Key West, which is further down, at the end. So many great stories down there of people reinventing themselves and not being who they actually say they are, when you dig a little deeper.
Right.
But I mean, that's not the main theme of the book, but it was certainly one of the things that I wanted to explore, was just kind of like this culture of Miami being ripe for scams and reinventing yourself as someone else, and people really not looking too deeply into it and just taking it as face value. There's a lot of get rich stuff down.
They also, people who have come down here to reinvent themselves don't want to ask too many probing questions that they themselves don't want to answer in turn.
Sure.
Do you have a writing routine or schedule?
I do. I write every morning. I am a slow writer. I wish I was one of those people who says, oh, I've done 5,000 words today or 3,000 words. No, I write for 1 to 2 hours. I write straight through. I write from the beginning until the end. Some writers do a scene or do a chapter here, and then they move everything around and shift everything around. I'm not like that. I'm very linear.
I think whatever your routine is that works for you is fine. I read a lot of different things and I talk to a lot of different writers about what their process is. And I'm always happy to maybe explore something that I haven't tried before. But if it doesn't work for me, I let it go.
Exactly. Recently, I switched my writing desk, and I've noticed there's a little bit of a change and some stumbling blocks. And I'm actually might even consider going back to my old writing desk, because there is something about that routine that allows you to be creative, because there's certain things that you have that structure.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like a security blanket. You know, it's like, and your body almost knows. I like to keep the lights low. I write early in the morning, have a desk lamp, but I have the lights in the room off. So it's kind of like a little cave almost.
Yes.
You know, I'm very focused on the screen. And in my new desk setup, it's not. It's like actually in front of a window that faces the sunrise. So I'm getting morning light. And I have noticed it's a little harder for me to get into that creative rhythm of that cave. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like that security of that cave.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've noticed that, and it's very interesting. I'm not saying that my new desk isn't going to work, but there is a difference to it.
The story cave has gone away, and now you have a new...
Yeah, kind of like bright light.
Yes.
Maybe I need to go to the light. I don't know.
How long have you been working with the new setup?
Oh, about a month.
Long enough to tell.
Long enough to tell. Well, I like it because it's a desktop, so the screen is larger. And my old setup is a laptop with a much smaller screen. And so in my head, I was like, oh, bigger, better, but maybe not.
Maybe in your writing cave you need smaller, and then the desktop would be better for editing when you could use a little more real estate.
And exactly. And that's kind of what the reason why I did the trade was, because I was doing a lot of editing and a lot of other stuff. And I was like, oh, it's so nice to be able to see everything and, you know, flip between pages more easily.
Do you outline?
I do a skeleton outline. I use Plotter. I really like it. It's a software. And I like it because it's simple. I like a simple structure, you know, and easy to see. I'm actually right now deep into book 2 and just have been working on some things because my skeleton was a little too lean, you know, and I needed to plug into some other things. It's helpful. And I like that, you know, I know the beginning and I know the end. And what's great about writing is the journey between those two things. And I think during that is when you discover subconsciously you have planted a few things into the story. And then while you're writing, you're like, oh, this is where the twist comes.
Yes.
And it's almost like your subconscious knew these things, but just didn't, you know, give you the memo on them, you know?
Yeah. Memo from subconscious. You want to be thinking about this. Write this down.
Exactly.
If only it were as easy as taking dictation from your subconscious. I know you initially from Mystery Writers of America, the Florida chapter, because we both do live in Florida. And I know that you have co-chaired Sleuth Fest in the pandemic years, which was probably not very fun at all. And you're going to be co-chairing it again for next year, 2022, when we are back in person.
Yes. I'm a longtime volunteer. I had run the registration and I had done a lot of other volunteer jobs in Sleuth Fest. So a lot of people probably know my face. Well, Sleuth Festers know my face from that because I've been a longtime volunteer in the organization. But then I co-chaired our 2019 conference, which was wonderful. And then we're so disappointed that we had to cancel 2020, but everybody went through the same disappointment. You know, everything was such chaos.
And Sleuth Fest is typically February, March. So it was right at the beginning of the pandemic.
It was right at the beginning. And our guests of honor had their plane tickets already booked. You know, I mean, we were that close to going. I mean, the program was even printed and the bags were printed. But anyway.
Collector's items.
So 2020 was canceled, and then 2021 we went online.
Yes, I was.
Which was
did you
go to it?
Yeah, I did. I thought you and Michael did a terrific job, both with the program and working with an unfamiliar process. Sleuth Fest has been a certain way for so long, and now to pivot to online where you can't have multiple panels going on at the same time, you just have to rethink the whole thing. But I thought you guys did a terrific job with it.
Oh, thank you for the compliment. Yeah, I mean, Sleuth Fest is normally 4 days. You have 3 or 4 different tracks. You have a dedicated forensic track. There's a lot going on because it's a writing craft conference. And so when we switched over to having to do it virtually, the thought was, one, we don't want to overload people. And it seemed that at that point, people were kind of getting that Zoom fatigue. And so we wanted to give everyone a taste and show some of our highlights and show what we do and show that we are an amazing craft conference. But it was like we wanted to give you a highlight. Well, let's go with some culinary here. It was a tasting.
Yes.
It was a tasting menu is what we gave you.
Highlights of years past and a little teaser for what's to come next year.
Exactly. And so we're actually deep in planning right now for 2022. We have our guest of honor, Jeffrey Deaver. We're very excited to have him as guest of honor. And the faculty and agents and editors will be revealed soon. We're going to be back in our Deerfield Beach hotel. We're very excited and all good things. And it'll be so nice to be able to be in person with people again.
And I can go for quite a while without seeing people and be perfectly comfortable with that. But I miss the in-person, like the first time I hadn't seen my mother and my sister for a year. And when I saw them again, it was like such a relief to be able to see in person, but also with writing friends, like just to be able to meet for lunch and feel comfortable meeting together and talking about writing, because the virtual space is fine for just gathering, but you lose the in-person communication, the in-person connection, the networking that you
And I was just going to say networking, because that is very much what people talk about Sleuthfest, and people have met their agent there.
Yes.
People have met their critique partners there. And I will tell you that sometimes meeting your agent, like you've met them and they don't become your agent till a year or two later. But the reason why you have that introduction is because of Sleuthfest.
Right. And you've met in person. Like there's a face to go with the name. It's not just a submission through the email or a letter, if people even still submit through the regular mail, where they don't have a person behind the name. They just have the name on the page.
Right, because at Sleuthfest we have 2 days, 2 afternoons of pitching that you get to pitch directly to agents and editors. So, you might have pitched them a manuscript. It might not be the manuscript that you finally are signing with them, but that's your introduction. Oh yes, I met you at such and such. And also the network of people, of writers that you cultivate and grow is so important, because like you said, writers, we're in our cave, we're perfectly happy being alone and isolated, but as soon as we finish writing, we really need to be out there talking to other writers, because it's what keeps you developing as a writer. I don't think that you grow in solitude.
I don't think so either. Not for something like this. And the collaboration, and not in we're writing this together and both our names are going to be on the book, but just you're having a problem with not who the killer is, because you know that, but you need a good way to kill someone or hide the body or hide evidence or present evidence or whatever. And so you're sitting at lunch with a table full of other people who know what you're going through, and you say, I'm having trouble with this, and you just toss around a few ideas. And even if you don't use any of the ideas that are tossed around, just getting it out in the open sometimes releases something within yourself, and then it's like, aha.
Put it this way, I have several different Caribbean cultures in my stories, right? Now, I can speak for the Cuban-American because that's mine. I'm married to a Puerto Rican. I lived in Puerto Rico for a year on the island. I can speak to that. Those things I feel comfortable with. We have some Dominican friends. We have, all of this other stuff. But in book 2 that I'm working on right now, I introduce a Jamaican character, and I wanted her to be authentic. And I needed a sensitivity reader for a couple of passages, because one, I wanted to get it right, and I wanted to be respectful. I didn't want to, patois is out. There's not going to be any of that, but there's also certain words and certain slang that you use, right? So anyway, through my various networking, I know a writer who has Jamaican heritage, and she was like, "Oh yeah, send it to me, and I'll have a look over it." And that is what is so important about developing your tribe of writers, is that you rely on one another to help you see things that you might be missing, right? Or like even having somebody read over something and go, "Oh, this part was confusing," which of course to you was perfectly
Yes.
straightforward because all that backstory is in your head.
Yes.
But to the reader, they don't have that same
Access.
information. Yeah,
Access to your thought process.
exactly.
And it's key to get things right. You know, it's easy to say, oh, it's Caribbean or it's all Latin, but that's like saying that every state in the United States is the same. And we all know that Texas is wildly different from New York, which is wildly different from Alaska, Florida. You know, you want someone who can give you some of that local knowledge so that your background rings true.
I agree.
And is there a creative outlet that you put into your writing or that gives you some creative respite from the writing?
I do miniatures, actually. I don't really have time for them or space for them. I love a good miniature project. I have what I call a meeting house, which is a little coffee shop and library, kind of lending book library that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have another one, which is I call it Eve to Eve, which is Halloween Eve to New Year's Eve. So it's a Halloween and Christmas store, which was a lot of fun to do.
I bet.
I did another little room, which is a cat cafe, which I did out of, those little like terrarium planters.
Yes.
IKEA had them for a while. I got one of those and I made it into the cat cafe.
That's so neat.
That's one of my little creative outlets, which somewhat transferred over to my book when I was having trouble kind of visualizing my characters.
Mm-hmm.
I went and bought some Barbie dolls. Now, Barbies are not miniatures. They're a much larger size,
Right.
but still that kind of idea of playing with environments.
Yes.
So my character, Miriam Quiñones, she gets a job, thanks to her best friend, as a cooking show host on the Spanish language morning show. They have a little cooking spot.
Mm-hmm.
And that person has left on maternity leave and they need a short-term person.
Mm-hmm.
So Miriam's best friend says, hey, you could do this. And she's like, I'm not a cook. She's like, but you are a cook. You're great. She's like, but I'm not a chef. But anyway, so she gets in there. When I was working on that character, I was, for whatever reasons, you're stumbling and you're trying to build this character and world builds and so forth. So I found a kitchen set and I have my character Miriam, and then she has a young son. He's 4 years old. I bought a little doll for him, Manny. He's over there. And then I bought a doll for the best friend, Alma. And it just kind of allowed me to see them in an environment. And that kind of made the little neurons spark and so forth and so on, and just really helped me. And so maybe that is one of my processes, it's like I kind of, it's not like I'm going over there and having them talk and converse with one another, but it kind of helped me build out interiors and like see them in spaces so that they became 3D instead of just names on paper.
And I think that physical movement uses a different part of your brain. So it frees up, I think, the subconscious to work on the problem that you're having so that when you come back to it, you're a little bit fresher and have a different perspective.
Right. And the character I'm writing, she's 32. I am no longer 32. I
But
do
you
remember
were
being 32. I do. But so there was some of that, just getting to know your character. And now I feel like I really, really know who Miriam Quiñones is.
That's an interesting point because I'm older than you, so I was 32 longer ago than you were. In fact, I just turned 62, so that was 30 years ago. And 32 now is vastly different from 32 30 years ago because of social media.
And there's a lot of little social media stuff in here, and I had to be really thoughtful about that because it has to be real, because it's contemporary. You know, I'm not writing a historical. I invented an app that I talk about in there because that makes sense, because that's really how we all live now. You know, it's like, oh, let me check what happened. Let me go to the app.
You want it to be authentic without going down the rabbit hole of it's all about social media. It's a part of, it's a seasoning for the story. It's not the main dish.
Exactly.
Well, this was terrific. Where can readers go to find out more about you and your writing?
I'm Latina Sleuths, Latina Sleuths, all across social media. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can also type that in and put a .com behind it, and it'll direct you to my website. I run a blog called Cozy Florida, so cozyflorida.com, with two other Florida cozy writers, Tara Losh and Cheryl Holland. Take a look over there. We've always got fun stuff going on over there. And I am also on Facebook in a fan group called Cozy Mystery Crew. And you can become a member of that. There's 12 authors on that, and we all rotate and host different days and have a lot of fun over there. I've just recently joined that group as one of their authors, and I'm having so much fun interacting with readers.
And I'll have links to all of those in the show notes. This has been really fun talking to you and catching up with you a little bit, Raquel. It's been quite some time since I've seen you in person, and I look forward to Sleuth Fest next year when I see you again.
Excellent. I look forward to seeing you too, Linda.
Thank you for joining me this week. To view the complete show notes and the links mentioned in today's episode, visit tartwords.com/tart331. Before you go, follow or subscribe for free to the podcast to receive new episodes when they're released. Follow now in the app you're using to listen to this podcast, or sign up for email alerts through an easy sign-up form for bakers, readers, and or writers at tartwords.com/about. Thank you again for joining me, Linda Hengerer, for this episode of Tart Words.